subscribe.
Dad wasn't the only one dodging conscription into the armed services during the Second World War, or on the trot as they called it. Aunt Rose, next door, who was divorced from her husband Bill, had a couple of blokes hiding out in her house for ages. The word deserter has always had cowardice associated with it, someone too yellow or too frightened to fight. But without exception, the men who used Lee Corner as a safe hideout would have, and could have, taken on the German army single-handed if they'd wanted to. What you have to understand is what I said about myself in the beginning. You have to look at their background and roots. The East End might as well have had a wall built around it, because in terms of government help and interest, it was shut off from other areas, and those within the boundaries could either get out or get on with it. All of a sudden, these men were ordered to give up hard-won jobs, leave their families to survive without a man to support them, and face possible death, all for a king and country that had never given them a second's thought before. I know that every man that was called up, no matter where he lived, and was in the same boat, but the difference was that the East Ender had the bottle to say, "Fuck the army." Who could blame them for refusing? Certainly no one round our streets. I never felt ashamed of my father then, and have never done so since. I understood. It was a different world that I grew up in. When I watch television in the recreation room, I am amazed when I see what's on offer for the kids of today, particularly the adverts as Christmas approaches. Don't get me wrong, I think it's great that children now have so many exciting things and don't know what real want and hunger are. But what a contrast to 50 years ago, which is no time at all in the scheme of things. A child today might ask for a colour television for their bedroom or a state-of-the-art computer. Us kids could expect and be overjoyed to find a shiny red apple, a handful of nuts, and some sweets in our Christmas stockings. And for a main present, a football or a pair of roller skates. We were old enough to want a brand new bicycle, but wise enough not to set our sights too high. These days of paper packaging that must use up acres of rainforest make me think of how we used to buy household items and sweets. Many things were sold loose then. For washing our hair, Mum might send us down the shop for a pennyworth of soft green soap, and the shopkeeper would deftly form a cone from a piece of paper, pop the soap in and fold the top over. A twist of tea would be bought in the same way. Jam, when we weren't getting it from Mr. Holloway, was collected in a jar and then used again and again for refills. Fish paste was collected in a cup and salt broken off a large block. It was the traders who came round the doors that gave London the colour I remember so much. The muffin man ringing a large brass bell as he pedalled up the street behind a large box fitted to his tricycle, calling out, "Muffins, fresh muffins, 2 a penny." The ice cream man had a similar setup with a bike and a box, but he'd have "Stop me and buy one" painted in bright colours across the front. Another fellow would sing his advert, "Salt, mustard, vinegar, fly papers, catch 'em alive." It had a catchy little tune and would bring all the old girls running out. Black or Asian people were a rare sight in the 40s, and we'd stare in fascination when a figure in a turban turned up on the doorstep. In broken English, he would try to sell Mum bright silk ties, headscarves and things to hang on the wall. We kids were more interested in what the other black man sold, because he was the Indian toffee man. Whether the name came from the confection or from his place of birth, I've no idea, but Indian toffee was something like candy floss. We had a fondness for sweets, and I remember one in particular, stick jaw. A lump of that in your mouth, and you wouldn't be able to talk for half an hour. The dog winner man was another regular on the corner of Valence Road. He would collect a bundle of single sheets listing all the previous night's dog racing results from stadiums like Whitechapel, Hackney or Catford. His wage would be the penny or tuppence he stuck on top of each one, and he probably earned himself 10 shillings or so because no gambler wanted to wait until the newspapers printed the results the next day. My dad, or the old man as we called him, often said, "Do us a favour, Reg, nip down and get me a dog winner. I'll feel lucky." Sometimes there might be a printer's error, and then all hell would break loose. At that time, there was no such thing as betting shops. If you wanted to lay your money on a dog or a horse, the only legal way was to place your bet at the track. To get round this, the bookies would have runners who would take your bet in the pub or street. These fellas stuck out like a sore thumb with what seemed to be a standard uniform of long coat and pork pie hat. Because of the occupational hazard of being lifted by the law, these men were never still. Like nervous birds, they were always looking over their shoulders. When they legalised gambling, Grandad Lee thought he'd have a go, even though, up until then, he'd never had a flutter in his life, because he didn't have a clue about filling in slips and what he should be doing. It was a safe bet he'd make a mistake on the form. When he checked the results, he found he had won 30 shillings and rushed down to Danny Levy's to collect. When he got there, Danny said, "Sorry, Mr. Lee, you're backed a loser. Better luck next time." Grandad went up the wall. "You bastards ain't doing me out of my winnings. I want it now," he shouted. Then he started throwing punches. A couple of blokes pulled him off and got him out of the shop, with Danny Levy shouting, "You'll be getting a visit from Jimmy Taylor if you come round here again causing trouble." Taylor was a local hard man who worked for the bookie. When Grandad told his son, our Uncle Joe, he went straight round to sort out the bookie for threatening his father. Of course, then he found out the true facts. Levy, who was a decent sort of bloke, said, "Joe, I only mentioned Jimmy Taylor in the heat of the moment. I wasn't going to follow it up. I'll tell you what I'll do. Your old man's got it all wrong. His horse wasn't in the first 5, but I don't want to fall out with your family. So to keep the peace, I'll pay him out of my own pocket." They shook hands and Joe took the money back to his dad and put it on the table. Grandad looked at it and said, "There you are. Fucking Robin Jew bastard. It's got to get up early to get one over on me." Joe didn't try and explain. It wasn't worth the effort. Grandad wasn't the only one who could get a bit stroppy. Nan could be a handful if she thought she'd been wronged. Her coalman, who'd been sacked from his round, tried the oldest trick in the book. He called on Nanny and asked to be paid for half a hundredweight of coal that he had delivered. The door to the coal cupboard was set in the outside wall, so it was possible to empty the coal in without the customer being aware. But she knew the coal hole was empty, so she set about him with her stick and chased him up the road. Another time she had a row with a neighbour while she was scrubbing the front step and ended up throwing the bucket of soapy water over the woman's head. As well as being a bit gobby, Nan didn't mind pinching a few things to help feed her family. When they lived in Kelday Road, there was a dairy opposite that kept its own cows. They sold other things as well, and what Nan would do was go in carrying 2 metal jugs. She'd get milk in one, then use the other to nick anything that was small enough to fit into it. Eventually, the owner, who wasn't stupid, said to Aunt May, "You girls are all right, but I don't want your mother in here no more, because she's robbing us blind." Nan didn't feel guilty about being caught. She just said, "Fuck him, I'll do me shopping somewhere else." Another time, Uncle Joe walked down the shops to meet her and carry her shopping home. He looked in all the shops until he came to the baker's, where he could hear a lot of effing and blinding going on. He opened the door, and there was his mother pelting the owner with fresh bagels. While she was choosing what she wanted, she'd been squeezing all the rolls to make sure they were fresh. That was until she was told to either buy them or leave them alone. That was all that was needed for her to blow her top, and by the time Joe pulled her out, there wasn't a roll left in the tray. The way Nan and Grandad carried on didn't mean they were being cantankerous for its own sake, but they had known hardship all their lives and had grown up in an area where you got nothing without fighting for it. Softness was seen as weakness in the East End, and only those prepared to stick up for themselves and family were the ones to survive. Like all the houses in Valence Road, Nan's was overrun by rats and mice that came from the railway yard opposite. They didn't bother her. She'd just flick a duster at them and say, "Fuck off out of it." Or before she'd pour out a cup of tea, she'd blow in it in case mice had got there first. It was from her that I got the lifetime habit of drinking strong tea. If I just popped in for a moment and said I couldn't stop, she'd say, "What's the matter? Don't you like my tea?" There would always be a large metal teapot stewing away on the trivet by the fire, and she'd just keep topping it up. I picked it up once and noticed it was quite heavy. I took the lid off and found it was nearly filled to the brim with tea leaves. I was sitting talking to her one day while she dusted round the room, and when she lifted the cushion from Grandad's chair to plump it up, underneath were 2 flattened mice. When he came in, she said, "Look what you've been and done to them poor mice." He said, "Blow me, I've only sat on Bernard and Aubrey." He'd seen them so often he'd given them names. Grandad wouldn't go near a spider, yet he'd pick up a rat with his bare hands. One tea time a man knocked on the door and said, "Excuse me, Mrs. Lee, but I just saw a rat run in your front door." Nan told Grandad and he said, "Tell her to hang on. I'm having my tea." By the time he was finished, it had got upstairs and was running round the bedroom. He went up after it, and 2 minutes later, he came down the stairs, holding the screeching rat by the back of the neck. He walked straight out of the door, and for a laugh, terrorized some girls walking past before he killed it in the gutter. Every time he saw those girls after that, he'd say, "Come here a minute, I want to show you something." But they never hung about long enough to see if he was joking or not. As we all lived on the same road, I spent a lot of time at my nanny and Grandad Lee's house when I was little. It was a bustling house full of people and excitement that thrilled me as a young boy. Of all the characters who were in and out of there, one impressed and inspired Ron and me more than any other, and that was the boxer Ted Kid Lewis. When we first got to know him, he'd been retired for about 15 years, but at 50, he was still a legend. To listen to him talking of the old days and describing the fights he'd had and then squaring up to him in a friendly spar was like a youngster today shaping up to Muhammad Ali. Born at the top of Brick Lane, his real name was Gershon Mendeloff, and he'd started his career at the Wonderland Theatre opposite the London Hospital in Whitechapel Road, the place where most Jewish fighters headed for to get a foot on the ladder. From what he told us, his technique was a mixture of old-style prize fighting and modern boxing skills. In 20 years, he went from cabinet maker to world boxing champion. On the way, he had won 3 British, 2 Empire and 3 European titles before taking the world title from Jack Britton in Boston, America. And now that stocky, dark-haired, broken-nosed man who'd taken North America by storm was in Nanny Lee's kitchen throwing mock punches at us. On the wall out in the yard, Grandad had fixed up a mattress which he told us was what all the old-time boxers used. With soft red brick, he'd drawn the rough figure of a man with arrows pointing to different body parts we should concentrate on. Chin, forehead, solar plexus, lower ribs, and so on. We'd often practiced on the mattress, so when he suggested we show Mr. Lewis what we could do, we shot outside and knocked it to bits. I'll never forget him standing there saying, "Keep that guard up, punch with both hands, keep on your toes." Then afterwards saying, "You boys have got what it takes, you'll go far." This encouragement from our idol was enough to get us honing our boxing skills. We'd already joined the boxing club at school under Mr. Bell and were filled with enthusiasm, but with such praise from a world champion, we felt nothing could hold us back. How could we go wrong? We were boxing at school and boxing in a makeshift gym upstairs at home. We also boxed at a youth club near Spitalfields Market called the Valence Club. This was run by Mr. Davis, a really nice Jewish fella who also happened to be a midget. I believe it's wrong these days to use that term, but that's what he was, and without embarrassment, that's what he called himself. His wife and daughter were equally small. What impressed me was how he dressed. He might have been small, but you never saw him in anything but a sharp-tailored suit, shirt, tie, and highly polished shoes. He had a reputation as a judo expert, which must have been an asset against potential piss takers. The youth club based in the crypt of a well-known church, had table tennis, snooker and various other activities that included boxing training by another Jewish fella by the name of Bill Gates. Until we got kitted out in proper gear, we used to fight in scruffy old plimsolls and shorts made from cut-down women's knickers, which will give you some idea of the underwear fashion of the times. It was a rough little club, but it had a good atmosphere where everyone mixed in together. One of the boys I became very friendly with was an Indian who always wore a turban even when he was fighting. Before I got to know him better, I think I made a friend of him at first, just out of novelty, because not many kids at that time could boast a mate quite so exotically dressed. The gym at home was first set up by Brother Charlie for his own use, but as he knew he was shortly joining the Navy, he let us use it, then allowed us to take it over altogether. Mum must have been a saint to put up with the noise above her head, especially when half a dozen mates would come round and join in. But she never complained, just kept us supplied with lemonade and biscuits. A lot of my friends came from homes where a slammed door or a too loud wireless could earn them at least a bollocking from the old man, or at worst, a clip round the ear. So to come round to 178 and let off some steam without getting into trouble was outside their experience. Mum's capacity for love and friendliness won over every kid that came through our door. Even today, I get visits from friends who never fail to remember her with the greatest affection. A typical example is that of James Aish, who is still a good friend of Ron's and mine. In later years, Jim became a professional villain and, surprisingly for his size and weight, an unbeatable bare-knuckle fighter. Never judge a man by the lifestyle that circumstances forced him to take up. On a recent visit, he told me that he had put his criminal past behind him, joined Mensa, and started a career as an artist. He gave Ron and me a portrait of our mother that was so realistic it brought tears to my eyes. He also said that putting brush to canvas on this painting was an emotional experience for him, as he remembered our mother's small acts of kindness that were to remain so large in his mind for the rest of his life. Like the time he was playing in the street outside our house. His family, like so many then, was struggling to make ends meet. There was food on the table, but no money left over for much else. So there's young Jim playing out in a November drizzle wearing a summer shirt when Mum called him over and gave him a warm roll-neck jersey. Being a lot younger than me, I can't say that he was a special friend at the time. In fact, I don't think he'd even been in our house. But to Mum, he was a child in need, and that's all that mattered. On another occasion, she noticed one of his friends tying string round the toes of his shoes to keep the soles from flapping open. She called the kid over to the door and gave him a pair of socks and a pair of almost new white plimsolls. What impressed Jim more than anything was the fact that Mum also gave the boy a tin of shoe whitener so that he could keep them looking nice. On top of that, every one of about 7 kids got a big lump of bread pudding. Of course, that started something that anyone else's mum might have regretted, because whenever the boys were hungry, which was most of the time, one or other would say, "Let's go and play outside Mrs. Krays," and without fail, out she would come with a slice of bread and jam, bread pudding or biscuits for all of them. I suppose with the money that Dad was earning with his gold and clothes buying, plus Brother Charlie bringing in a wage, by the standards of the East End, our family was better off than most. That didn't mean there was anything to spare, but Mum would rather go short herself than see others go without. In the same way, when she was a girl, her mother, Nanny Lee, would dish up the main meal for the family, then potter around the kitchen while they were eating, saying, "I'm not hungry." The truth was, there wasn't enough for everyone. Often, too, that main meal might only be a bowl of rice with a tiny lump of jam in it, or a couple of slices of bread with sugar sprinkled on it. Mum cared for us so much that whenever I brought trouble home, her tears hurt more than any flogging could have done. That brings us to the end of another episode. The story will continue in the next one. I thank you all for listening. God bless.
for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please join our Facebook group. It's called Krays Crime Lords of London. We're a friendly moderated group with over 1,000 Kray and other celebrated gangster videos available for view. There's also thousands of images in the photos sections. The link for the group is in the YouTube description section. I hope we see you there soon.
Leave a like and subscribe.